We are now live on Twitch. There goes the @. And now we'll wait a few minutes. I've got to
Oh, I don't have permissions to type.
disable this. You don't have permissions to type? Oh yeah, I
No.
gotta change the channel too. Everyone can now send messages. You should be good to type in the chat room now. Hello. And I have to disable the sound effects every time.
That's a good idea.
Yep. There we go. Should be all set up now. Just gonna wait a few more minutes for people to show up. And I have to pull up the submitted questions.
Got 5.
We also have the release survey. So
Did we want to do that too?
yeah, if there's anything in there, we can talk about it.
Alright. I was actually looking at that just now as well.
Have to pull it up though.
I expect there to be more questions now that people are going in. Hello. I gotta open your stream so we can say hi to people there too.
Yep. We have Alder and Iron Nugget. It says they're both first-time chatters on Twitch. How is Sog's volume compared to my own? Moose says buff the shield beetle. That's not happening.
Nerf the shield beetle?
Buff.
Oh no, I'm saying nerf it though. Anytime someone says buff, I'm nerfing it.
Volume sounds good.
Good? Okay.
Loik says buff, question mark. Iron Nugget says no, do not nerf the shield beetle.
Too late. It's already nerfed.
Shrike says sounds good on his end.
Cool.
Earl says, hold on.
Wait a minute.
Hold up. Alright. Well, looks like we have a fair few people, so seems like we can get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our third monthly Campfire chat with the devs. Devs meaning just myself and Sog at the moment, it would seem. I don't know if we'll be joined by anyone else, but seems like we will be the regulars whenever this does happen.
I think Warp usually comes in like a little late.
But how's everyone liking the new update? If you have gotten a chance to play it. 0.10.3. If you play on Steam and your game version is still 10.2, then you'll need to opt into the beta to play it. The instructions for that are in the announcement for the release. It doesn't seem like it's been too buggy. I did see someone say that they had a crash to desktop when they started a new pilot and jumped out of the first system. Has anybody else experienced that? Because that is concerning to hear if somebody's crashing on a new pilot. Usually if people are crashing, it's because they got themselves into some weird scenario with plugins or they messed up their save, but he was like, nope, new pilot. And it broke. 2 was still plural, says Panema. Yeah. Panume.
Said I'm actually
Penny.
online.
Your name is now Penny.
Numia? It's like pneumatic. It's Numia.
Neme?
Pneuma- uh,
New.
what is this channel? Status? Guess there's still no way to stop us doing this? I guess not.
Doom says, I had one crash on mostly vanilla pilot on the new version, but can't remember the circumstances and couldn't replicate. Okay. If you can't replicate it, it's not as... I mean, it's still concerning whenever you do get a crash, but if it's not
Yeah.
replicatable, then usually it's like Cosmic Ray. Flipped a bit.
I will say, as for the coalition stuff, there's only been the one odd example that's happened. Everything else has seemed to have been working.
That's good. That's good.
So,
All right, well, I will admit, given that last weekend I was concerned with getting the release out, and this past week, since then, I've been opening pull requests for the stable release and for the next unstable release. I'm kind of getting some stuff out there. I had no agenda for today. So, I don't know, Sog, if there's anything specific you wanted to talk about before we get into the questions. I mean, the big thing is just the fact that we have a release out.
yeah. The big thing with me is, again, the coalition stuff. So,
Yeah,
I did.
Shrike asks what's new. That is actually the very first question. Um, I don't know if
Yeah.
that's you who asked it, but the very first submitted question was, with the new update, what's new? And that was actually asked the day after our last uh, chat, which means that somebody was like, oh, the next chat's going to be after the update. Let me ask this so that when they do get to the updates, they really betted on us not delaying that release. Would have been real awkward if we delayed the release a couple weeks.
Just for that one guy.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing this release is the fact that we now have two coalition storylines that you can start. The introductions for both the Heliarchs and the Lunarium. They are going to be mutually exclusive storylines. So once you choose which side you go with, the rest of the storyline on the other side is going to be restricted to you. But this is
Yeah.
the first chapter, so it's very similar to how the human campaigns will go once they're introduced, where you can do the introduction chapters for Free Worlds, Navy, and Syndicate in any order at the same time, whatever you want.
Hmm.
But as soon as you choose which side you go with, that's the side you're locked into for the rest of the storyline.
Yep. You can do all the missions on either side. The only difference is you choose at the end.
Then aside from that, not too many massive new content additions. There's some new stuff in Coalition space and a few new missions in human space, but for the most part, in terms of new content, that was the big flagship item there was the Coalition.
Hmm.
But that's not to say it was a small release, though, because there were a handful of balance changes that we talked about last time, I believe. The fact that engine, specifically thrust progression, has been flattened a bit by bringing up the smaller stuff and slightly bringing down the larger stuff, meaning that smaller ships should feel a lot faster now. And larger ships will either be unchanged or slightly slower. Afterburners have been completely unchanged, so if you want even more speed, you can still get afterburners. And we had some tweaks here and there to some ion weapons, if you like those. Then we had a lot of user interface and user experience changes. And that was actually one of the questions in the release survey. Now, I will say, we have a fair few people here. I only have 6 responses to the release survey. And I'm not saying rush and go answer it, because I do want you to play the release, get a sense of the changes, and then respond to it. But it looks like only 6 people so far have actually bothered. If you don't know what I'm talking about with the release survey, if you go to the announcements channel on Discord, every time we do a new release and we announce the release, we have a survey that we'll create for the release. If you go to the bottom of the announcement, you'll see 2 links. One of them is to the discussion post on GitHub that we also open every time there's a new release. But the other one is the feedback box, the survey for this release. We asked a few questions, including what are your thoughts on the Coalition storyline? How do you think about the thrust changes that I just talked about? And then thoughts on the UI improvements, and is there anything else in the UI you think we need to improve? There's plenty of stuff that we have in mind as to what still needs improved. There's actually some stuff that's going to be coming for the next stable release that I've been working on. So, who was it? I forget who it was. I have the changelog up right here. What? Okay, it was Tom. Thank you, Tom. So we can now add tooltips to the controls and settings in the preferences panel. We couldn't do that before, which meant that we had to very carefully pick the names for our controls and settings so that it was self-explanatory enough what it was. But some of them, there was just no way we were going to fit all of the complexity of what a setting entailed into the actual setting name. So, for example, like there's one that lets you send orders to your escorts using the orbits map. I forget exactly what it's called. Let me pull up the game right now. But you really would not be able to guess that just by the name of the setting. Loading. All right, preferences, settings. I think it's on the second page. Gameplay, or is it map? System map sends move orders. Like, what does that mean? Now, if you mouse over it, there will be a tooltip that pops up that says, right-click on a location in the system minimap on the galaxy map to send your escort to that location in the selected system. That should probably be escorts plural, but it's a work in progress. We'll have tooltips for every single control and setting now. There's a lot of stuff that people have been like, hey, there's nothing in the game that tells me how to do this. Well, now, especially with these controls, you'll know. So if you didn't know, holding shift and hitting the reverse key will send a halt command to your flagship to actually have you stop. It's similar to the hold position command for your escorts, but it's for your own flagship. The tooltip for reverse will now tell you how to do that. There's like 3 different ways you can use the jump key. You can either tap the jump key and it just says, okay, I'm going to jump to the next system, and as soon as your flagship is ready, your flagship jumps. If you hold the jump key, you will tell all of your escorts to get ready to jump, but they won't actually jump until you release the jump key. Then there's if you hit shift and the jump key, that will send a fleet jump command that tells your fleet, get ready to jump to the next system. Once everyone is ready, immediately jump, so it's not waiting for you to release the key. Then, when we get into the next system, do the same thing again. So it's basically like automatically holding the jump key for you and releasing when it needs to for every single jump in your jump path. That's been a feature for a while. If you didn't follow along with the development of the game, there's basically 0 chance you would have known that. It might be in one of the help dialogues, but from what we can tell, people don't always remember those or read those. But now you can go to any of these keys, mouse over them, and it'll give you a very nice tooltip saying, hey, here's exactly what this does. Here's all the additional things that this can do for you. Like, for example, or another example, all of the fleet commands that you can send to, like, fight my target, gather around me, hold position. For those 3 fleet commands, if you didn't know, you can also use the right click to send those same commands. So if you select your escorts and right-click on an empty area of space, you're telling your escorts hold position wherever I right-clicked. If you right-click on a hostile ship, you're telling your fleet, hey, focus fire on this target. If you right-click on a friendly ship, you're telling them, gather around this target. Now, the normal fleet command that you can send is gather around me, gather around the flagship, but this actually lets you tell your escorts to gather around other ships. So you can have them, for example, protect a mission NPC, or if you have one of your ships is more fragile than the others, you can actually tell your other escorts, hey, gather around this one ship. It's a very nice feature. That's now in the tooltip. So if you mouse over any of those fleet tooltips, it'll tell you. You can also send this command by right-clicking. So that's a major one that I want to get finished for this release. Another one that we have is, I believe, also from Tom again. I think the last time we mentioned Tom and Flowers have been knocking out these UI changes like crazy. We have, which pull request is it? It's hitting the F1 key will display the help dialog for whatever panel you're in. So the help dialogue will show up the very first time you go to a certain panel or you're in a certain situation. For example, the first time you're disabled, it'll tell you like, "Hey, you're disabled. Here's what you do in this situation." But if you wanted to get that again, you would have to go into your settings, go to the last page under the other category, and re-enable all of the help dialogues. You couldn't pick and choose and say, "Hey, only show me this one again, or only show me that one again." You had to re-enable everything just for the sake of getting one, assuming you even remembered that that one existed. But now, thanks to Tom, hopefully in the next release when we finalize that pull quest, hitting the F1 key will display whatever help dialogue is relevant to wherever you are in the game at any time. Very nice. I think those are the two big ones I had in mind for more improvements that are coming in the future. I know another one is the uninstall and the move to storage and cargo keys on the outfitter. They're only hotkeys. There's no like buttons on the interface that show you like, hey, you can actually do this. Now, it shows up in the help dialogue, but that would probably be something that would be nice to either have a button for or have something somewhere that says, hey, use this hotkey. You can check it any time. Now, being able to on demand pull up the help dialogue will be helpful for that, but another thing I was thinking of, probably not in 10.4, is some sort of panel in the preferences that shows you, hey, here's all the shortcut keys for every panel in the game. So those we could give tooltips, and then you would have like a section that says outfitter, store outfit, and then you could mouse over that and it would tell you when you press this key, if you have an outfit selected, it will move it into planetary storage, or it will move it into cargo, or so on and so forth. But yeah, I think that's everything I want to mention for that. Anything you want to add, Sog, or does that kind of cover it?
For UI, that covers it. I'm not. Um, I was looking in chat. Someone was asking. I was asking. We need tooltips that appear when you hover over the tooltips. That's
Nested
isn't that
tooltips.
oh, nested, yeah.
Um,
But yeah, otherwise that seems about it.
yeah, Zena says ZK or CK3 did nested tooltips really well. I'm not sure how we would do that because the tooltip follows your mouse, so you
Huh.
couldn't mouse into the tooltip. We would have to change how tooltips work. Aren't some of these tooltips getting added into continuous as Tybe? Yes.
Yeah.
Whenever my pull quest is looked over by a few more people. Tybe says, haven't even played after the release. Shame.
You play this game?
Iron Nugget says, I haven't been keeping up with the new content, but has or is something happening with the Shiragi? I really love the Emerald Sword and was hoping for some new content regarding that faction. Not to get too spoilery for people, but at least in my mind, so the Shiragi is an extinct faction, meaning we can't really do too much with them, and I feel like the Emerald Sword is going to be the peak of what we do with them. Maybe there's some
Yeah.
mentions here and there in the future, but for the most part, that's what they have to offer. I don't know if you were going to say something else, Zog.
Well, it's kind of like tangential to the relay story. It's kind of one of those one and done sort of things where I think if we tried to expand it to some big story, it would kind of lose meaning behind what it already is.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it's not
I know there
intended to be.
are,
It's not intended to be like a big thing in the story. It's just like
yeah,
background information.
kind of like that unique learn some more lore of the galaxy sort of thing, rather than oh here's another faction, here's another campaign. So
Yeah, Iron says Sag, but understandable. Yes, yes.
yeah,
Doom says a general purpose tooltip describing what a tooltip is that appears when you mouse over a tooltip.
a tooltip is
So,
this.
yeah, yeah. All right. I
What?
think we should move on to questions, though. So
Mm.
we kind of already went over the first one. What's new with the update, and what's next? That was the other question that's part of this. What is next?
Um,
Kind of just went over some of it for user interface stuff, but I guess the question is more so: what's the big things for 0.10.5 that we're looking to do?
there's a
Saga, I'll let you start with
whole
that.
whole big like bingo basket or however you want to put it, other different things that could come in 10.5.
Yeah.
We're talking about 10.5 or 4.
10.5, because
Yeah.
10.4 is just going to be a small patch,
Okay.
basically.
So, um, I mean, Iraqi could add some more coalition stuff. Who knows? I plan on getting the first chapter of Gigano content in. So I know a lot of people looking towards that. A big one is probably going to be the Korg revamp if we do end up getting that finished for 10.5, which is
Hmm.
relevant for a later question. But so there's that. I'd actually have to pull up what all we have open to see what else there is, because I know there's other big things. Oh yeah, there's the pirate intro to their campaign, depending on how if Lake gets back to that. These are all possibilities. It's not like for sure's, but there's a lot that could happen. Is what I'm saying.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, some things I have in mind. I have a lot of old pull quests or old branches on my fork that
oh yeah.
had a lot of scattered stuff that I kind of worked on for a bit and then never finished. But I'm now finally getting around to reopening some of these. So if you check GitHub right now for the stuff I have open, you'll see I'm adding mining lasers, or at least a method to have lasers that, or weapons rather, that can increase the yield of asteroids. So right now, every asteroid that you can mine has a payload to it, a payload size. And that is the maximum number of items that can drop from that asteroid when it is destroyed. But the actual number that drops is random. It is, on average, 25% of the maximum payload. So if you see an asteroid in the data that says it has a payload of 40, that means that on average you're expecting only 10 actual items to drop from that. What this new mechanic does is adds a prospecting attribute to weapons that increases the drop rate of any asteroids that you mine with that weapon. So, for example, with the values I was throwing together, you could have a mining laser in human space that doubles the drop rates of silicon asteroids. Now, that isn't too crazy because silicon asteroids are already super cheap. Like, you don't get a lot out of them. But the way I designed it is that each asteroid has a toughness attribute that goes along with it. And the toughness of the asteroid determines how resistant it is to prospecting. So while silicon you can double the payload of, gold is only a 40% increase because it has a much higher toughness. Platinum is only a 20% increase. Some of the lower value ones like lead, iron, these are 90%, 85% more. Granted, maybe these values are way too high for a human mining laser. Maybe we want more of a progression with different mining outfits in the game. Because originally when I designed this mechanic, we only had 2 weapons in the game. Well, actually, we had 1 weapon in the game that was like explicitly designed, or at least in part designed for mining, and that was the core slicer. Because that's the weapon that the Moretti use for mining asteroids. Now, in human space, there are ships that use lasers, there are ships that use particle cannons for mining, but otherwise there was really no mining going on from any of the factions in the game, aside from a few human ships and the Moretti. At this point, though, we now have dedicated mining outfits for the Gegno and the Coalition.
Woo.
And the Korth. I just remembered that too. There's also a
Yeah, they have
Korth
the.
dedicated one. So we have 5 different weapons that,
Mhm.
if we assume that we have a human mining laser, that's 5 weapons that will be dedicated for mining and will most likely get this new prospecting attribute added to them. And then we can mess around with the numbers and see how we like increases in
Mhm.
drop rates when using these. But that will be a way to actually lean into a mining playstyle, because that's one of those things that has kind of, I wouldn't say fallen by the wayside, but was never really expanded upon. We added asteroids, mineable asteroids, a long time ago, but that was kind of it. We added them and then just kind of left them there. Over the years, we've kind of talked about how the Sparrow start is very bad as a combat start because interceptors just are not in the best places for combat. there are things that we're doing to make it so that it's not completely unbearable to play as an interceptor. But part of that has been adding alternative ways to actually use a sparrow. So not just trying your hands in combat, but also trying your hands in mining. Stare says, what about remnant mining outfits? It seems like a lot of ships are built for scavenging in the wastes. That could happen. It's just not something that exists in game right now. Now,
I do want to. Oh, go ahead.
there's definitely one thing I can think is going to happen. Another feature I'm working on is tractor beams. So right now we have weapons can have a negative hit force to them that will pull in other ships. So that's in a sense a tractor beam. But I'm talking about tractor beams that pull in like stray cargo, like cargo boxes that are floating around, or when you destroy an asteroid and the flotsams come out, dragging those into your ship instead of you having to go and actually hunt them down. Because sometimes those things can go flinging off somewhere crazy, and it's very difficult to track them down, especially if you're in a slower ship. But tractor beams will actually be able to pull those in. And I would not be surprised if we had some sort of tractor beam outfit to the Remnant.
Yeah. What I wanted to say was, my plans, at least for the Gigno, is that their drills would have the most efficient, what did you call it? Prospecting?
Yeah, it's currently called prospecting. We can probably change
Yeah.
it, but
So,
that's where it's
because
at.
the Gigno are a low tier, but their entire concept is focused around kind of rocks mining.
Yeah.
Their ships are named literally after rocks. Um, and because they're such a low tier, the original idea was that they have some of the best mining equipment in the game, so they still have something to offer the player.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping to introduce some other mining mechanics with that too. I'm not sure what exactly we're still thinking about that. I know like special cargo to hold minables was one, if we might be doing that. But yeah, an overall mining expansion is very nice. And we also get to add ships that have been sitting in the game for a while, the Sunder and the mining drone.
Yeah.
They're not actually in the game, but
Yeah, we'll probably get. So we're definitely going to get at least one dedicated mining ship in human space. The Sunder, which is
yep.
supposed to be a step up from the starter ships. If you choose a Sparrow and decide, hey, I want to go into mining, the Sunder should be the first thing you go for. Now, after that, it's kind of a pick and choose, like what ship you feel like is probably better for mining after that. I know that the Pirates campaign has a planned ship that is supposed to be like an old, like ancient mining ship.
Yep.
You might be able to get your hands on that, but it's not for sale, to my understanding. But we might end up adding at least one or two, like dedicated purpose mining ships in the future.
I really think the area would be a really good mining ship because it's kind of like a Sunder in that it can hold the mining drones and then have turret mounts for the tractor beams
Mm-hmm.
or rely on fighters for mining as well. That's why I love the area. So
Yeah. Stare asks, would there be outfits for mining beams that also have built-in tractor beams? That's a no at the moment. So right now, if you install a weapon can only have one purpose. Either it fires projectiles, it's an anti-missile turret, or it's a tractor beam turret. We can't have weapons that are both anti-missile and a ship-to-ship weapon, or tractor beams and a ship-to-ship weapon. Or another thing, tractor beams and anti-missile turrets, well, they can only be turrets at the moment. We can't have anti-missile guns or tractor beam guns. Azur's combined turrets would be neat. Yeah, it is something I've thought of before, but it would be. I feel like it'd be a bit of an undertaking to get working in a way that's not super funky. Especially with the way that weapons are actually defined in the game. It would be very difficult at the moment. There'd be a lot of spaghetti we would need to untangle first. I want to eventually do something like that for the Avdi lasers, says Azure. We'll see. We'll see. Doom says you can do them currently with fractional hardpoint costs-ish. So here's the thing, though. You can have a fractional hardpoint cost, but there's still actually only a limited number of hardpoints. Like the outfit attribute can say that it's a fractional turret mount, but it actually still takes up a whole turret. Yeah, Azure says I tried that and it doesn't work. Yeah, it's not something you can really do. I have actually thought of that, but yeah, you can't shove multiple turrets into the same mount. Xena on Twitch asks, hype for more mining complexity. Are there any plans to make it more exciting, like special drops from asteroids or that kind of stuff? Absolutely. So this is not a pull request I have open yet, but I want to. I mentioned earlier how the default drop rate on payloads for mineable asteroids is 25%. Right now, that's hard coded. We cannot tweak that. What I would like to do is have a lot more complexity to how payloads can behave. So, for example, tweaking the base drop rate so that you can have something other than 25%. Maybe you have a payload of 1 that only has a 5% chance of dropping. Then we can have something super rare drop out of silicon asteroids. And it would still be worth it to try and mine silicon asteroids, because maybe every so often you'll actually get something worthful, or that's worth it out of them, instead of a bunch of silicon that's real cheap.
Great. Loot crates out of the asteroid?
Yeah. And now that I mention that, I might actually go back and change how I've defined toughness on asteroids. Right now, toughness is a feature of the asteroid itself. I'm wondering if toughness should be a feature of the payload. So you could have different payloads that react differently to whatever weapon you're using against them. That's okay. I'm digging that idea. I'm gonna change that on the pull request when I get the chance later. But yeah, we'll have stuff like that so that, because like right now, there's nothing actually stopping a mineable asteroid from having multiple things they can drop. It's just that all of the vanilla asteroids only ever drop one thing. Silicon asteroids only ever drop silicon. All of the special asteroids in the Ember Waste only ever drop void orchids. So I knew it was best to wait before reviewing, says Hurl. I mean, a good chunk of it. So all of the what's it? I mean, the way the prospecting works isn't going to change. It's just I might change where it's actually defined on the mineable. I mean, it's not even a big pull quest, so it's tough. You can look at. But yeah. Trying to think if there's anything else we had in mind for mining. Times is 0.01% to mine a supercomputer chip from a silicon asteroid. It randomly assembled itself. Ah, Iraqi is here. Hello.
All right, guest speaker, let's go.
Yeah, I think that's everything in terms of mining. Azure says, I have an entire document about revamped asteroids, like big asteroids that split into smaller ones. Sog has talked about rich asteroid or rich vein asteroids or something, if I recall correctly. Yeah, there's definitely more.
Yeah.
With it.
When I brought that up, I think you were saying to me how we don't need to do that everywhere in the game, but I was thinking again, like Space being mining focused, especially the ring world that has a billion rings, would probably be an example of where those kind of larger ones would be. And it wouldn't be the only example. There might be other places too. I mean, I'd have to look at it more, but maybe there'd be a place in Algae Space like that. But overall, I'd like to do it for the gig now.
Plugin installing for 0.10.5. I would absolutely love to have that. I was actually talking with the devs last week. I was like, hey, we should probably look at this for the next major update. So if you guys don't know, we have a website that you can go to if somebody's able to link it, and like basically publish your plugins, and everyone can look through the website and see what plugins are available. And Rising is actually working on a really, 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 really cool addition so that you could access the metadata basically for those plugins in game and choose to download them while in the game. So you wouldn't even need to actually go out to another website or anything. You could just go in game, go to the plugins menu, and see, hey, these are the plugins that we have available. And you click download, it'll download the game. I think you still need to refresh your game for it to actually take effect. So like close it, reopen it. But that would be amazing to have. Star says that sounds like a W, so we wouldn't have to use the launcher. In essence, yes.
Rip launcher. See if any questions came in. You want to click it?
Fisher says, can we define a limited space in a system for asteroids to spawn? Not exactly sure what you mean by that. You can already define
It's
um, the
he means like
range that
all
they spawn
asteroids.
at.
And like I think he means like a belt. Like
Mineable ring around a planet. I mean, we have belts around the system center, but no, we don't have mineable rings around
his
planets.
his concern, I believe, is to not have an infinite asteroid field.
The infinite asteroid field is different from mineable asteroids.
Is that what you're saying, Pizzer, or is that just like part of it? Because I remember whenever you were talking about that, it was usually remove infinite asteroids. Yeah.
Remove infinite asteroids, this is true. Fisher says it's for being able to mine the remainder of planet and shattered world.
Oh, I see. Huh.
I mean, that you could have the asteroid still circling the system center for now, at least.
Yeah, if a world shattered and the asteroids or parts flew out, it'd still probably go into orbit around the sun. In a way, I don't know. In a way,
As just having asteroids orbit objects instead of the system center would be cool. Yeah.
yeah.
And I
But
think with the way that the asteroid orbits are defined, that wouldn't actually be too difficult. We just have to define a different origin. Like where's the center that they're orbiting around? And then in the system definitions, under objects, you would just be able to add a mineable ring there. Although then the question is, would you want to be able to define like, hey, the system ring, the system belt has these types of asteroids, but the planet belt has these different types of asteroids? I feel like the data might get a little cluttered, but it might not be too bad. Command asked, are there plans to add more uninhabited planets in the wider galaxy, like we see in Remnant and Gignos Space? I know that there's a few that we added for gas giants that you can land on, assuming that you have a ship that can actually land on gas giants. But there definitely are plans for more uninhabited planets in human space that I know of. And it won't just be flavor. It's not just going to be, oh, you land here and you read something. There might actually be some stuff hidden there that you might be able to find. I'm not going to say too much, but we're not just going to add uninhabited planets for the sake of adding uninhabited planets. When we want to add new stuff like that, we want to have something for it.
yeah.
And there's a feature that I want to get in 0.10.5 that would probably allow us to start doing those. And then, second question: is there ways planned that the player can turn an uninhabited planet into a base of sorts, mainly to park ships and store outfits outside of the established planetary system, mainly as like an RP thing? Or you're only storing all these alien outfits and ships in Republic space with no question to ask, just for free. Not really.
Yeah. There's a couple of plugins that have a lot of work into doing that with like missions and events. But as
Yeah,
for
there's
the,
the one big one that comes to mind is Ursa Polaris. You build your own station and you stock it up with its own outfitter and shipyard, I believe.
I
But
forget what it's called, but Zora also has one too that like you make a whole economy and you have to like monitor it and make sure you don't go broke. I'm not sure the details, but
yeah, there's all sorts of crazy stuff people do in plugins. As far as vanilla goes, though, I don't think we're gonna have anything like that.
yeah.
We're not gonna have like the player colonizes their own planet or anything because it doesn't really fit with the story of the game in a sense.
hmm
Um, and it's just kind of not the gameplay
It,
that we go for.
it is very good for plugin content though. Um,
It just says you should be able to land on a star and instantly die.
yeah, no boarding sun, just poof, your ship's gone. Let's see.
All right, let's move on to the next question in the file. What can we expect for the Free Worlds Republic and Syndicate campaign? Um, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by expect from the Syndicate camp. I mean, from the Free Worlds campaign because it's already in. As far as the Republic
Different
and Syndicate campaigns, uh,
different perspectives on the main story.
yeah, I
It's
mean
probably
that's
the
kind of the
most.
gist of it.
Yeah.
With such a broad question, we can't really get into super specifics or anything. If you
Yeah.
mean when you can expect them, still up in the air, unfortunately.
Mm.
In terms of their contents, like Stog said, it's still going to be following the story of the Civil War and the bombings and the pug showing up at the end. It's just you're on a different side of it. You can make different decisions. You can uh, point the course of history in a slightly different direction, but it's largely just going to be like, hey, what was the Navy doing that entire time, or what was the Syndicate doing that entire time that I was siding with the Free Worlds? But there was also a question recently of, well, how would the Free Worlds act differently if the player wasn't there? Because that's also a question of, well, if you're not in the picture, how do things change? So you'll also see stuff like that where maybe the Free World is not as well off because the player isn't there to help them.
Yeah, so it's not like going to be a one-to-one, everything's happening exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
There might be like their own nuances in each campaign. Like the Republic campaign might have something that does happens into it that doesn't happen in Free Worlds, but not so much in that it would establish a new canon event. Like everything's kind of based around the Civil War, the bombings, the pug. But what happens in between that might be a little different.
Next
Um,
question. Will an avoid wormhole pathing ever be added? Using any kind of trade fleet whilst traveling through wormholes can take minutes IRL with ships with bad speeds, compared to just jumping to a nearby system 7 times and being done, which doesn't need as high of a speed stat to be fast. Thanks for doing these, by the way. They're fun to listen to.
you're welcome.
You're welcome. Um, so, I don't think we will add different pathing options for the automatic pathing because you actually can manually path your fleet. So this is another thing that we should probably add in like a tooltip somewhere. If you're on the map and you click on a system, your AI of sorts, your ship, is going to try and find the shortest path from A to B. But shortest path is least number of jumps. It's the least fuel. It's the least amount of fuel expended. It's the least number of days that it takes. I think there is a bit of weighting to fuel versus days because you can have two paths that have the same number of days but different fuel usages. I think it always goes least days, least fuel. But if there's something with less days but more fuel, it'll choose that over the one that's like one more day but one less fuel. So the days is the most important. But it doesn't, as you say, optimize for real lifetime. Because, yeah, if you have a slow fleet, then it takes them a while to actually get to the wormhole after they enter the system, land on it, get up, and then they can keep jumping from there. But what you can do is manually choose what path you want to take. So if you shift click on a system, when you have a travel path, that will add that system to your travel path automatically without choosing the shortest route between where you currently are and where you're clicking on. So say you want to go to Earth from New Boston, but you want to take like a roundabout path through the Syndicate for some reason. You could like shift click on a system in the Syndicate and then shift click on Earth or on Sol, and that'll then find the shortest path between your first your current location and then where you shift clicked first, and then the shortest path from where you last shift clicked to where you next shift clicked. So I would suggest doing that. If you see there's a 7 system jump that doesn't use a wormhole, then shift click your way along that jump path so that you actually end up using that instead of going through the wormhole. Delvin says, I was already considering trying to put together a pull request for several different pathing priorities as options. Would that be a preference? How would that be chosen by the game? Oh yeah, Ferocious adds, if two paths have the same fuel cost, the AI will also choose the safer route based on something. I think the safer route depends on the system, like who owns the system. If you have two routes and one goes through a pirate system and one doesn't, and you're hostile to pirates, it'll avoid the pirate system. So there is also that extra consideration there, but that usually doesn't influence things too much. Buttons on the map screen itself, he says.
Hmm.
I mean, we definitely have space for buttons there, so I could see that potentially working.
The hardest part was actually trying to make the buttons look like they fit, honestly.
Yeah. Uh, Xena asked on Twitch for our last question: is the idea to end the Republic campaign with retaking the Freeworlds, or will they still be independent? They will still be independent by the end of the Republic campaign. Something to note is that while we do want the campaigns to be distinct enough from one another that it does feel like you're playing a new story, the outcomes of the campaigns cannot be too radically different because we have other stories that we want to tell after the main campaign. And we want those stories to be able to have some sort of assurance that they don't need to account for crazy differences in the outcome of the universe depending on the storyline that you chose. So the free worlds will still exist. The Syndicate isn't going to get completely annihilated. The Republic is still going to exist, of course. Earth is not getting nuked. The Pug will show up regardless. Stuff like that. That way we have these like universal constants of some sort, where regardless of what happens in the storyline, we can have future storylines say, I can rely on the fact that this will always be the case regardless of what the player did. Now maybe there's still going to be tweaks that future storylines will need to do to account for small things and small changes in what happened because of the main storyline, but for the most part, major stuff will still be the case. And part of it is this idea that while the player is a major factor in the story of the universe, you're not the primary factor. You're not the only factor. There are factors outside of your control. No matter what you do, the free world is always going to form. Because, I mean, at that point, you're just too new on the scene to actually have influenced that. But then once you do, like, start influencing things, you're still not important enough to cause the free worlds to be completely destroyed. Like, you're never going to be somebody in the Republic who has the option to say, let's go scorch Earth on the free worlds and take them down at whatever costs. People absolutely freaking out in chat. Take revenge, nuke the player, nuke the game, nuke the nukes.
Nuke the game, yes, please. Get me out of this. I'm kidding.
But yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next question, and I'll let Sog start on this. Can you give a little more detail about the Quarg rework?
I can. I could talk a little bit about it, but if you want all of the details, there's a channel in our Discord called Quarg Revamp, and I've pinned everything we've done so far with it, including a link to a stream that I did where we streamed the whole thing. The overall summary of it is mainly balance and logistics. So we want to give them more ships. Not too many though. We're not talking like Horace or human 30+ ships. Actually, humans are like 60. We're getting like around 6-7 ships total now. Actually, let me pull up that pin real quick because I do have it pinned. We do want to balance the weapons and such a little bit better. Right now, the Skylances are pretty strong. The plan is to kind of tone those down a little bit while adding something on the higher end for their stronger ships. Again, the ships are going to have a different design rework. Again, if you check out that channel real quick, there's some actually examples really recently. I don't know, Derpy, if you've seen that, but Todd tried making the utility ship that all right, for that builds the ring worlds. So it's just mainly just giving them a little bit more ships, a little bit more of an outfit adjustment because right now the way they are is a little bit strong. It's main. I don't want to say mainly. A lot of it is because the Coalition campaign is now in the game, which the Heliarchs are going to oppose the Korg, I believe. And I know it's going to happen.
The
So,
intros, says Iraqi.
The intros. I'm sorry, intros. Intro to the campaign, not the whole campaign.
Yeah. So for those who aren't aware about why we're doing a Quarg rework, the Quarg were the first, I believe, the first alien faction, or one of the first alien factions added to the game. Way a while ago, there was humans, there was the Pug, there was the High, there was the Korth Raider and the Korth World Ship. That's just the old one, just those
The
two, and then the
painted
Chaser,
part later.
and then there was the Quarg. And the Quarg were intended to be this faction that was far above and beyond everything else in the game at that time, and they have not been touched since. Their balance is several years old, and they were never intended to stay the way they currently are. They were really just added as placeholders. It was an idea of, when we get to this point in the story, this is roughly the strength that the Korg are going to be at, but this will probably need changed, and at this point we're not going to change it. Because with the fact that we now have the Coalition intros, and from here on out the rest of the Coalition campaign is going to be developed, well, like Sog mentioned, if you're not aware, the Heliarchs will be fighting the Quarg.
Yep.
But we need to be able to balance the combat system, or the combat missions, around Quarg that are not placeholders. We need actual, proper, Tier 3 stats for the Quarg to fight against the Heliarchs. We need some sort of roughly equal footing between the two, so that it isn't just a complete stomp on the side of the Quarg, or we need so few Quarg to engage in combat in order to have the Heliarchs have a chance, or have so many Heliarchs that they have a chance. It needs to be roughly equal enough that it's not like a super large difference in fleet sizes.
At the moment, if you just say use a fleet the same size as a Heliarch fleet with the same size as a Korg fleet, they have no chance.
Yeah. There's also the fact that
Uh,
there's absolutely no variety in what the Quark have. They have one
Yeah.
weapon, they have two ships. There's really not much
Well,
we can do
technically
there.
two weapons, but
I mean, yeah, whatever.
yeah. Now we're not going to give them like 10 weapons or a bunch of weapons because they don't necessarily need a bunch more weapons. But the idea is with the logistics. So, for example, right now they just have a light warship, which is arguably not a light warship, and then they have the fighter, which is arguably not really a fighter. Um, the idea is to have like a few light warships, like three maybe two medium warships, and then one or two heavy warships. And then those heavy warships would be kind of the latter end of their technology, and kind of a lot more rare and more only found in things like the Coalition campaign rather than like either Ringworlds or something. But so it's just kind of to take what we already have that's existing and spread it out a little bit more.
Yep.
And give them new looks because their current looks don't really match. Unga bunga. So I will say though, because I know people are going to be like on my throat for this, the War Dragon's current style will be preserved in Captain Pester's personship, but otherwise we're leaning more towards that darker kind of theme of the Skylark. For if you would like to know, check out the pins in the stream I did. Hector, you saying the darker theme is better is ironic when you're using Discord light theme.
Yep. All right, last
Anyway.
question from the submission box. What's the story behind MZ adding devs to the project? So this is one that's an old story. The Jedi would not tell you about this. So, MZ, Michael, is the one who started developing Endless Sky years ago now. He wanted a spiritual successor to the Escape Velocity series from Ambrosia Software all the way back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But he couldn't find one. He looked around a bit, was like, well, if I can't find one, I guess I'll try and like work on one or make my own. He finds Nave. Nave was, according to him, kind of dead in the water at the time. There wasn't much development going on. So he didn't want to hop onto a dead project. So he was like, well, I'll just make my own. So that's when he starts making Endless Sky. He does that for 3 years, I think it was. Around that time, like 3-4 years. After a certain point, we now have myself, Wuzzle Printfoot was around, we had Pointed, DeHouch, Jafty was there, Warp Core was there. We had a bunch of people, Local God, a bunch of people who were developing, like helping along with the project at this point. But we were all doing it through pull requests. At the time, MZ was still the only one who had access to commit directly to the game or to merge anything into the game. And we noticed that the rate at which new things were being merged and committed was slowing down a lot. If you go to the games repository on GitHub, there is an Insights tab, and you can go down to contributors, I think it is, the contributors section in the Insights tab, if it would load for me. And you can see a graph of changes over time. This is taking a while to load. There it is. And you'll see that things start off in 2015. They really take up in 2016. 2017, then start of 2018, there's a lot, and then it drops down. And there's not very much. There's a bit in the middle of 2018, then it drops down again. And there's not much in the end of 2018. That is like the Dark Age. That is when very little was going on with the game. Anything that was happening was, I think, almost entirely merged pull requests. There wasn't actually much that MZ himself was doing. We took note of this. We were going to make a fork of the game that we developed ourselves. I think it was like me, Kiko, a few others who were kind of thinking of this idea. And it almost came to the point where, like, no joke, we were maybe days away from launching our own project entirely. We'd already made a new repository. We already started moving stuff over there. We were very close to just up and leaving, like, the main Endless Sky. Luckily, MZ comes back and he takes note of all this and he's like, hey, sorry, but Hector says, I'm pretty sure the community repo is still available. Yeah, we didn't delete it. Like, it's still there. But he was like, hey, sorry, life's been busy. I haven't had a lot of time to work on the game. And what time I have had, I just haven't had the motivation to work on the game. Because at this point, with a lot of new people kind of joining the project and opening their own pull requests, a lot of his time became reviewing pull requests. Where have I heard that before, And he just didn't have the motivation to review things. He didn't, I guess like that wasn't just enjoyable to him to sit around all the time reviewing pull requests. He kind of wanted to work on stuff on his own. Maybe not like entirely, but there was a point where he realized I can't keep up with the output of everyone who's trying to help work with the game. At the same time, he was working on the Wanderer campaign, which, as we know, is still not complete, and he hit writer's block. He was like, I don't know how to finish the rest of this story. And it seemed like the fact that he had writer's block, combined with, so he couldn't really work on what he wanted to work on, combined with the fact that all these pull requests were opening up, so like what he wanted to work on, the time was taken up with reviewing pull requests. That's what led him to working on the game less, along with the fact that I believe he said at the time that his job had moved location, so it sounded like he had to get up and move. It's a very crazy situation overall. But he was like, I see that you guys have a lot of enthusiasm for the game. You guys want to see this game continue to be developed. That's why you're trying to up and move everything, because I'm not working on it. So he was like, if you guys can choose a few people to become developer, like I'll add as contributors or collaborators on the repository, and they can continue the development of the game without me. That's where we get myself, Tahouch, and Pointed being added to the repository. And from then on out, it's kind of the rest of the history of the game, as you might be used to if you've been around for the past few years. We have added more developers over time. A lot of them we had to get, like, kind of quote-unquote approved through MZ still. We had to email him and be like, hey, we want to add these people, and he would have to add them. Then last year, early last year, he converted his account into an organization account and added himself, Tahouch, and Zichaz as admins of the organization, which gives them admin perms to the repository, which means we now have people who we can talk to that aren't MZ who can add new developers to the game. And that's when we get SOG and Warp Core. And between when it was an organization, when myself and Tahouch and Pointer were added, we got Peter, Wizrad, Anarchist, Um, I don't want to forget anybody, but you know, like we added everybody else
Yeah.
after that time.
Here's what I do.
But yeah, that's the basic story. So TLDR, MZ started the game. Life got crazy for him. He lost motivation. We didn't lose motivation. We almost tried to replace the game. He recognized, was like, hey, you guys have the passion for this. Here's the keys to the kingdom, so to speak.
And we took off ever since.
Yep.
Dylan is a lot faster nowadays,
Mm,
from what I know.
a lot faster. I mean, like the opening of pull quest is increased in speed. We have
Well,
like we
yeah.
have a lot of we have a big backlog, but we've actually roughly kept up with it. Like as the rate of pull request opening is increased, the rate of merging has increased. Sometimes the rate of opening pull requests gets the upper hand. That's when we like increase to 160 pull requests from 120. But I mean, it's not like we're completely underwater here, and we're always trying to work on things to try and improve the development pipeline here.
Yep.
All right, but that's all the questions from the submission box. So I guess we can
I'm gonna
move
add
on
some.
to the release
Oh, the
survey.
survey, right, right.
Yeah. Let's
Which
see.
still only has 6 responses. Hmm.
Yeah. And of course, people can always ask questions in the chat
Yeah.
rooms that are available. We'll answer things there as well. But unless anybody has questions immediately, I'll move on to the few responses we have to the survey so far. So the first question was, the correlation intros were a long time in the making. Do you have any specific feedback to them? So Iraqi, listen up. The recent
Yeah, I
addition
knew
is
that.
nice. Can't wait to see more of it. Somebody else says not at the moment. No feedback at the moment. I will say
Hmm.
you can make multiple responses to these surveys. Please do not abuse that. But if ever you change your feedback or have new feedback, you can come back to these and add that in a new response. Someone says, I've begun the Lunarium intro and like it so far. I want to close this tab, so I'm submitting the survey as is and may resubmit after completing more of the coalition story.
There you go.
Well, they submitted, so you can go
Yeah.
ahead and resubmit at a later date, as I just said. Someone else says, on at least one conversation chain, if I recall correctly, there's more than just one, I'm given the option to ask questions I've already asked. This specific case is the joining the Lunarium discussion. For example, asking, am I the only outsider helping you, does not prevent me from asking that question again after their explanation. That is something we can improve.
Yep.
There are ways that we can add knockout lists to the choices. And generally,
Correct
we
where you are.
try. Sometimes we intentionally have it so you can repeat questions, but usually, if we do have a loop like that where you can keep going back to the same set of questions, we'll knock out the ones you already asked for. But that is something we have to explicitly go in and add, so we can
Yep.
take a look at that. Next
Reki.
up, yeah. Is it possible to join the Lunarium without completing any other missions? Or it is possible to join the Lunarium without completing any other missions, but joining the Heliarchs requires either Rim Archaeology or the main storyline to be completed first. I think this difference in requirements may lead some people, or more people, to doing the Lunarium storyline rather than the Heliarch storyline. Also, the Lunarium intro missions seem to be much easier to get than the Heliarch ones. And it feels like I had to get out or go out of my way to avoid joining the Lunarium if I wanted to join the Heliarchs.
I I could be wrong, but I don't think the Heliarch requires Rim Archaeology or the main story because you don't need to do all 5 mission routes. You can do up to 3 and then have done a bunch of coalition missions. But in order to do all 5 routes, then yes, you would need to have those accessed. Iraqi, does that sound about right? I'm pretty sure both sides, the minimum requirement to unlocking the join option is 3 routes and then some number of coalition jobs. And then the higher you go, so if you do 4 routes, it's less coalition jobs. And then if you have all 5 routes of one side, then you don't need to do any jobs. Yeah, so Rim Araki here, guy who made a coalition, says yes, Rim archaeology / preloads are needed respectively for the recon and expedition chains. But what I'm assuming is you don't need it for the whole chain, just those specific routes, not the entire Heliarch story. And with it being harder, if it's seemingly harder to join the Heliarchs in the Lunarium, I don't really think that's a bad thing because the Heliarchs, essentially with the Lunarium, I believe you're going to be fighting the Heliarchs, and then if you're going to be fighting with the Heliarchs, you're going to be fighting the Lunarium and the Core. Um, I could be wrong though, but the idea is with the Heliarch one is you're kind of readying yourself for a stronger enemy sooner. Iraqi, correct me if I'm wrong. Iraqi is typing.
The Peacemaker asks, is there anyone in the community attempting to document the history of the game? I've only been around since earlier this year, and I think it's very interesting to hear those stories. I don't
History of
think
the
so.
development or the lore of the game?
Well, he's talking about the stories we just talked about with MZ, so like the history of the development of the game.
Document the history of the game. I see. So I'll have that written down somewhere.
Not that I
It's
know
just
of.
kind of been a it comes up almost every dev chat really.
Eh. I mean, there's
Or
some there's
campfire
some
chat.
things that like aren't the best to bring up every single time. So,
Yeah, goes for any
so
game.
some rocky sections in the history books there. Do not ask about Endless Sky development between 1939 and 1945. When will the boarding rework
1984.
happen? Never. Um, it's not really high priority at the moment. So
Yeah.
if it happens at all, I mean, depends on what you mean by boarding rework. Because there are competing ideas as to
Mm.
what is meant by boarding rework or capture rework or plunder rework.
Personally, I'd like to see Derpy's iteration of it, which
What was mine again?
adds limitations to. I'm not saying the other one. I haven't really looked at the other one, but I don't really think we need an excessive rework to boarding.
Yeah.
Ideas.
So
Okay. But
there's two ideas to a boarding rework that are kind of out there right now. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but I feel like effectively, for the sake of balance, they kind of are. One is the approach I'm taking, where, well, why would we want to rework boarding? Is my first question, and the answer is, at least to me, because capturing is powerful. So really, it's not just boarding we're trying to rework; it's capturing in general we're trying to rework in some manner that makes it a bit more balanced compared to other methods of gaining ships or gaining profit in the game. What I've kind of aimed toward is keep the boarding action the same, so you still have hand-to-hand combat where you buy these hand-to-hand outfits. And it's a very, very simplistic dice roll, effectively, as to who wins, depending on the stats of either side. But I've added a new section where once you take out all the crew in the ship, you then have this small capture interaction that you can potentially have depending on the ship that you're trying to capture. And the capture interaction is, okay, the crew is gone, but the ship is locked. The captain didn't just leave the keys in the ignition, so to speak. You now have to actually hijack the ship's systems to actually gain control of it. And this would be done through needing certain outfits to actually capture the ship, and the outfits would be consumables. So you would actually have to invest in being able to capture the ship once you've gotten rid of its crew, on top of the investment of actually being able to take out the crew in the first place. And we could set this up
yeah,
so that larger ships require more expensive outfits in order to actually capture. And maybe certain alien ships require very specific outfits to capture that are more limited in quantity or in the ability to actually get them. That way you can't just build a massive Karek Vought fleet so easily. Maybe you actually have to spend a decent amount of time getting your hands on this special technology to actually be able to capture those ships in the first place. Fisher's just hacking a minigame. Not exactly. It would still be kind of a dice roll that the capturing, the boarding is at the moment. One thing I'll note though is I don't want to make boarding and capturing too overly complex. I don't want to add like mini games, like new windows that pop up and you have to do like a
yeah.
hacking thing. Mainly because that's just not really the game's
That's
focus,
not
so
really
to
what we're
say.
doing.
I feel like
There was.
the main gameplay of the game should be in flying around in ship to ship combat. Anything else, like conversations or boarding, stuff like that, should be a lot more simplistic. Because
It,
then we kind of get two out there where we kind of have like four games in one. and we're trying to balance
Yeah.
each of these games individually against each other. If all these like peripheral games are simplistic, then it doesn't take too much focus away from the main game, and it makes it easier to balance things out.
It's kind of like our comment we answered, I believe, last time, where someone asked if we would add the capability to, if we land on a planet, go into
Fish.
some sort of planetary setting and have like a ground combat sort of thing. We wouldn't really, like you said, doing all these kind of mini games. If anything, it'd be like another little interactive menu. But to have it be this whole new display or a mini game, like an actual like moving around inside the game in the game, we wouldn't really be doing
Hector
that.
says Endless Sky's gameplay loop is in ship outfitting. Everything should relate back to that. Yeah, that's effectively the idea.
Yeah,
I think the gameplay
the
loop is
game,
playing the game.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
I do want to backtrack real quick. Iraqi did respond for the coalition intros. If you're still here for that. The ideas for the intros are, as he says, for the Lunarium, you're introduced to activities you'll be partaking in during their side, and are given opportunities to learn more about the Coalition and their motives to fight the Heliarchs. So this is primarily towards the Heliarchs with the Coalition itself. For the Heliarch side, you're also introduced to activities you'll be partaking, giving that some context as to why they do combat the Lunarium. But there's also insight on the research of Korg stuff and attempt at preparing for an invasion from the Korg. So the Heliarch side, the Korg are also going to be in that equation. So one's kind of inner turmoil, the other one's outer, with some inner. So it does make sense that the Heliarch side is more difficult than the Lunarium, which I think is fine. I do want to grab these other two questions real quick. Will we have more broadside guns? It depends on the ships. Currently, most of the broadside guns are on alien ships, and we prefer to keep it that way because it's a kind of a different, interesting design that we don't want to just be giving humans everything. So right now, the examples of broadside guns, there are the missile ports, quotation missile, they can be guns, ports on Chorus ships, and there are gun ports on Gigno ships. Whether or not another new faction might use those may or may not be the case, but otherwise, will we have more? Probably, but will we be adding more to what we currently already have in the game to factions that don't have them? No. And I think there was one other question I wanted to look at. But capturing ships is too profitable. We know. What about players having to pay for repairs when they land? I could be wrong. Gabriel, correct me if I am. That was something that was part of Escape Velocity, and I think MZ chose not to add that for his own reasons.
I had thought of adding that in some manner, but I kind of tried whenever I'm trying to design like new like gameplay mechanics. It's not just
Yeah,
a question of like what would this how would this gameplay mechanic work. It's also a question of, well, what is this gameplay mechanic similar to? Like what is the actual end result of this? And the end result of having to repair ships in order to actually use them is that it's just adding cost to the capturing of the ship. But the way that I'm designing the capture requirements also adds costs to the capturing of the ship. So they're effectively the same
yeah,
thing. They serve the same purpose, and since they serve the same purpose, it doesn't really make sense to have both because then we're double dipping.
yeah,
Like we're making it cost you twice to actually capture the ship, and three times if you count having to buy the hand-to-hand weapons
yeah.
and pay for the crew to actually capture the ship in the first place.
Benny the Dromedary is kind of an exception to what I was saying with the broadside gun ports. It is a human ship, but it's only accessible through alien content, and it's one of a kind. So
Yeah, and to people saying bring back death benefits, if you didn't know about this a long time ago, before depreciation was added to the game, we had this feature called death benefits, where if you lost any crew when capturing a ship, you had to pay benefits to the families of the crew that were killed in combat. The amount of credits you had to pay was proportional to the worth of the ship that you were trying to capture. So if you were capturing a big ship and you lost a lot of guys, you would have to pay a lot. And the actual formula was something like you have two shares in the worth of the ship that you're capturing, every lost crew is one extra share. So if you don't lose anything, then that's you have 2 shares. There's 2 share total. You get 100% of the worth of the ship. You don't pay for anything. If you lost a single crew, that becomes you have 2 shares. There's 1 share of death benefits. 3 shares total. You only get 2/3 of the worth of the ship. So losing a single crew member, that's 33% of the worth of the ship gone instantly. It was something like that, where like just losing a single crew member was massive in terms of the lost profit. And it would the bigger the ship, the more you would have to pay, of course, because you not only would the ship be worth more, you would lose more crew. But what this did was it actually became profitable to just prey on small ships, because if you have a lot of crew and really good weapons, hand-to-hand weapons, there's like 0 chance you would lose any crew members boarding and capturing a small ship. And Hector says, paying after capturing a ship is basically just death benefits under a different name. In a sense, yes, but the mechanics of death benefits would be different than the mechanics of paying to repair a captured ship. Because paying to repair a captured ship could be a lot more controlled. We could say it's guaranteed that after you capture this ship, you need to pay this amount to repair it back to full functionality. Whereas with death benefits, it's a toss-up of, do you lose crew? How much crew do you lose? Stuff like that. Command says you have to pay to legally license a pirate ship in the Republic. I mean, that's another thing to talk about is license costs. So, like, you have to register your ship. Maybe it'd be the same thing as repairing the ship. But the thing is, that idea breaks down as soon as you leave Republic space. Does the free world still have that? Does the Syndicate enforce that? How does that work in Coalition space? How does that work in Wanderer or High space? If we do add any sort of features that are supposed to balance capturing, they need to work everywhere. They can't just be, oh, here's a lore explanation that works for Republic space, but that's it.
Mm-hmm. You have to play a minigame to play a minigame in Endless Sky. All right. Well, that's all the responses on the... Or no, there's more to the survey, actually.
Yeah. Hold on. Ferocious says on Twitch, in case people don't know, you can scroll up in the conversation log if you forgot something or missed something, or just want to review the whole thing. So yes, if you are in a conversation, you've made a choice, it doesn't just delete everything that was above the choice you just made. It actually scrolls it off the screen. So if you scroll the screen down, you can actually see the entire conversation above the choice you just made, if you didn't know that. So that is one way you can go back and review options instead of making the same choice again if for whatever reason that option is given to you. But yeah. Next question on the survey, we asked about how people feel about the changes to the thrust of engines. This is a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being this was a bad change and 5 being this was a good change. When we have 4 responses to this, 2 3s, 1 4, and 1 5. So no 1s or 2s. So it seems like either neutral or a good change to the 4 people who have responded.
Yeah, only 4 of the 6 responses cared about that. What?
Let's go. Yeah, you're not forced to answer every question on the survey if you don't want to.
Yeah, I'm just like, that was a big change. Kind of. But they're all leaning towards the latter end, so.
Yeah. Alright, next question. How do you like the UI improvements from this update? Are there any UI improvements that you think still need made in the future? First response, I think that they're all positive and I'm not creative enough to think of any. Thank you. Next one is jump range and view range are not very different from one another, which I encountered in Gegno systems. Yes, so if you don't know, there is a difference between the jump range that you have and the view range that you have. Now, by default, jump range equals view range. So any system that is inside of your jump range, you can also see. That meaning, if you haven't visited the system before, if it's unexplored, it will show up as a system that you can visibly see, like there is something there that I could jump to. For the most part in vanilla, this doesn't matter, because view range always equals jump range. But once you get into some of the story in the Ember Waste with the Remnant, or you get into Gegno space, there are systems that have a restricted jump range. Their jump range is smaller than the default, which means we have 2 rings on the map. one for your jump range, one for your view range. They are very similar, if not entirely the same at the moment. So it's difficult to tell what is what, because this idea is not explained anywhere as to jump range
Yeah.
versus view range. That is something we've talked about, but insofar it is a very small part of the game right now, that it's not like it's a super important mechanic to understand view range versus jump range. It just isn't explained. We haven't really expanded upon the UI for that. That is something we intend to do, though. I'm pretty sure we do have an issue open that's like, hey, we should change this so that the view range and the jump range look different, and probably explain what the distinction is.
I think the quickest thing that we could do is maybe make one of the rings dotted or something.
I mean, we
Not
could,
that,
but then what explains what that means?
well, I'd like have that explained, but like we don't need to add a bunch of like colors and icons on the map for. Is what I'm saying. But
Ferocious asks, what if we had a fairly high view range? It would make exploration less about stumbling around blindly, like even just a view range of 200 instead of 100. It would give you about a one jump of advanced warning of where systems even are. And it by default, and if by default they are different, it'd be less confusing when one or both fluctuate. Potentially.
mm,
I don't know if we would go 200 though.
double.
How about 150?
Yeah.
Hector says I'd be somewhat down for that. Doom says add big helpful green text, lime green text in Comic Sans explaining in detail what each circle means. Unfortunately, we only have a single font that we can use. Salt says, what is the Freeworlds campaign if not the most committed effort to rid oneself of our public taxes? Responding to Stare asking, when do we get tax evasion?
Technically syndicate too.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, feedback in general.
At the very last, actually, there's more UI though. Don't just skip ahead.
Oh, my bad.
More UI questions. If I recall correctly, clicking on an escort's ship silhouette in the bottom left used to select the ship as you could repeat or so that you could repair it, but that doesn't appear to work anymore. Oh yeah, I read this earlier when I was looking at these. I can totally see how that might have broken.
Oh
So,
no.
in the past, prior to this update, that UI that he's talking about was hard coded. The ship icons at the bottom left of the screen. I believe Warp Core made it so that it's an interface defined piece of UI now. And by interface defined, I mean we have a text file, one of the data files called interfaces, and we can define the positions and types of UI elements on the screen. Like half of the game's UI code is hard coded, half of it is in the interfaces file. MZ's intention was to eventually get everything in the interfaces file. We just haven't really tried doing that for everything just yet. It's kind of like as people
It's a
decide to
mess.
move things there, or as we work on new UI code, we kind of say like, hey, this should be in the interfaces file. The weird nut says the hitboxes on these icons is a small circle rather than the rectangle of the icon, plus the bars. It's hard to click on them. Okay, yeah, that definitely explains how it would be difficult. So
Mm.
yeah, we'll take a look at that. I'll poke Warp Core because he was working on that section of the code base anyway. Yay, more bugs to fix, says Hector. It's always another bug.
Every
All right.
patch.
Last question. I have not noticed any UI improvements this update. It would be
Oh.
nice if escort fuel bars in the bottom left were divided into jumps like the flagship fuel bar is. We probably
That
could.
might get hard to see after like 4 or 5 jumps though.
Yeah.
But perhaps.
I mean, we could max it out. I think we cap the flagship's fuel bar. So, like, after a certain number
Yeah.
of divisions, it just becomes solid.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if like you can see it, if you can notice 7 different segments in your fuel bar, that's usually the unless you're like stacking on fuel pods like crazy, that's usually the max. Maybe like 8 or 9. But I could definitely see potentially doing something like that. As far as if not noticing anything, check the changelog, and you'll see all of the stuff we mentioned there in the interfaces section. and you'll know what we did. Some of them definitely were subtle, but some of them, like, once we point them out to you, you'd be like, oh yeah, that changed, that's great. Like, I think I mentioned last time, you can now open the map at any panel, whereas before you could not open the map when you were in a shop. Maybe somebody goes to open the map and was like, oh wait. Maybe they don't even question why it opened now when it didn't open before. But, yeah. They're not bugs, they're surprise features, says Lou Hood. Yeah. Alright, now on to the last questions. Just general feedback that people had. Make fighters better, please. Working on it.
Yeah,
That's one of those. So, with fighters, that's one of those things that I feel like is a very, like, we could buff fighters way too much very easily.
Yeah.
Which is why any buffs that have been done to fighters have been very incremental.
Indirect as well.
Yeah, and indirect. We're not trying to directly buff fighters. Sometimes we're trying to buff small ships. Because I mentioned earlier on that interceptors are very difficult to use in combat. Just because the game is so, like, big ship equals better all the time at the moment. There's very small things we're trying to do here and there to better balance out ship sizes in general that indirectly buff the fighters. Types as fighters don't need buffs; they need to be made more usable. And yeah, that's a distinction that can be made. It's not just like we're not trying to buff the combat capabilities of fighters. We're trying to make it so that fighters are less annoying to actually use. And Ben N says, especially alien interceptors. I feel like human interceptors do better with their missile focus. I mean, how many alien interceptors do we have though? 2. The Model 8 and. Well, I think we technically have Gegno interceptors, but I'm not really thinking of those. We have the Merganser, says Benny. Oh yeah, there's that. The Grasshopper, I usually forget about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Grasshopper. The Grasshopper is that
I thought that was a fighter.
Merganser probably doesn't need buffs. It probably needs nerfs.
Probably.
Cool Breeze
isn't really in the game yet.
Yeah, it's not really available, so it doesn't really count. But yeah.
Yeah, is there a collision one? Rocky's about to type.
Incoming Locust too, but yeah, not in the game. Yeah. All right, next question. This one looks a bit bigger. My first visit to the Quarg was as a part of the Freeworlds campaign. I got the whole asking for help dialogue options before the first time meeting the Quarg dialogue popped up. Perhaps there's a way to combine them, or force the first time meeting the Quarg to happen first. So we can actually do that forcing, I think. Actually, it depends. If the conversation for the first or for the Freeworlds mission is an on-complete dialogue, we can't. But if they're both on offers, then we can use the naming scheme of the mission to force the order. So if multiple missions can offer at the same time, it offers them in alphabetical order. So we could just change the alphabetization of the name of the mission. But as far as you never met the Quarg before and you're only just meeting them in the Freeworlds campaign, that is definitely something we could probably add. Like maybe ask more questions. Like maybe the player could ask more questions if they had never met the Quarg before. Like, oh hey, what the heck's going on here? Then maybe if this is the first time meeting the Quarg, yeah, we could very easily combine the conversations.
I remember that occurred at one point with the Gegno as well. I had someone fly all the way over there, and they knew about the Quark mission, but for this particular playthrough, they hadn't done it yet, so they got it over there, and it was kind of awkward.
Mm-hmm. Interceptor, by the way. Dude just posted the stats of, yeah.
Just make it a light warship.
I mean, most of it's empty. We could definitely reduce those stats.
Yeah, wait a minute. That has 400 output space.
But yeah, but it's only using like 100 of it. 150.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It also has almost 200 weapon space.
It's uncapturable, though, so this is why I've never cared about it.
Yeah. Although, I think the upcoming Kahet stuff and Evgi stuff is based on that ship, so...
Whoa. Remove the comment. At Becca, explain yourself. Um,
What's next?
Not a big fan of the zooming in and out during landing takeoff or landing and takeoff, but I went to the settings and turned it off. So I guess I'm glad that people who like it have the access to it, but it is hard isn't hard to change. Yeah, I've thought of disabling that by default. That new landing zoom setting is
Yeah,
turned on by default. I think we should probably disable it by default
I think it should be
because
disabled.
it is a bit nauseating. I feel like after a while. Um,
I never really liked it, but to have it is fine.
yeah. I think it's the worst with wormholes. I feel like if you're landing on a wormhole, it shouldn't do it because it very quickly zooms in and zooms out as soon as you leave the wormhole. Um, with planets, with landing on planets, it's not as bad, but maybe the zoom just needs to be slower, so it's not as nauseating. I don't know.
If it
What do you
scales
guys
just
think?
how fast you take off, that might not be possible.
Um, Hale on Twitch says suggestion for outfitters: could you add the option to move your ship's outfit straight into cargo by pressing C? Right now, it takes two steps. You move the outfit onto your ship and all the ones in cargo into storage first, and then move everything back to cargo again. Yeah, that definitely could be improved. We kind of talked about that earlier in the stream if you weren't here. How the Outfitter UI needs a massive improvement around moving outfitters between cargo and storage and installed and in stock and whatnot.
Mm.
That's we should probably just like one day sit down and focus on okay, how do we want to redesign this and then just do it because it's one of those things that like what we have works now, so it's not super high priority to change it, but I do admit it's very bad UI UX. You want my drop down says weird nut? I mean, if what you have looks nice and works, it works now in quotes, says Hector. Yeah. So, I mean, it does. It just doesn't mean it works well. I don't want to divulge too much information here, but it will work. One of the so I work for a consulting company, and one of the companies that we were like one of our customers was like, yeah, we've been using the same like software system for like 15 years. It was one scientist like 15 years ago started it, and they just built on top of it for years now, and it is an absolute mess to work with. And they're finally like replacing it with something new.
That
Um,
sounds similar.
yeah, and and we're like joking around like, so why did you hold on to it for so long? It's like, well, if it ain't broke, it's like, well, broken is subjective.
Yeah.
Like it works in very large quotation marks. Was that scientist's name MZ? No. Other
Is
side of
the
the country.
Is
Yeah,
the
wrong side of the country for the company. Anyway, I know Weird Nut. You said eventually you were going to take some of the UI improvements you have and start opening them to the main game. I mean, be my guest whenever you want to do that. Because if you have stuff that cleans up the crappy UI code that we have and makes the experience better, then I'm all for it. Need more code reviewers, so yeah. Weird Nut says I'll make a list. All right. Last question. I really enjoyed the Wander campaign. When's the last portion of it being added?
uh
Next year
someday.
at the earliest. Like
Yeah.
sometime next year, probably late next year at the earliest.
We have the we have a group of people working on it. We just have yet to kind of get in touch and see where things
Tomorrow,
are
says
going.
Azure. Soon, trademark, says CRZ. Yeah.
Soon takes 1 to 5 years for business days.
I will say campaigns are not our strong suit. There's a
Yeah.
lot of improvements we've made to the game over the years since MZ handed it over to us. Campaigns really is not one of them. We have not picked up the Wander campaign. We do not have a Syndicate campaign. We do not have a Republic campaign. We have some stuff for the Remnant that kind of constitutes a campaign. We got the high stuff recently. We finally got the coalition stuff in. I feel like only like now we're
It
finally
goes.
finding our feet to have actual campaigns that are our own. Everything up
Yeah.
until now has kind of been like small content additions, small like small mission chains. Like the Emerald
Fixing the
Sword, I would not
game.
consider a campaign. It's rather large, but I wouldn't consider it a campaign. It's more like
Yeah.
a major storyline.
Yeah.
You have feet, send pics, bro. What?
What? Anyway,
Just coming right up and asking for it. Damn.
for free?
Just no lube.
What the?
Newspaper.
Hit him with
Whack.
that. Banned.
Shiragi campaign, please. We talked about that. Not happening.
Yeah.
Katie says Emerald Sword is also a pain in the neck to track down. Campaign should really be easier to follow than that. What do you mean track down though? Is it difficult to start? Because that is true. It's a 4% offer chance after the main campaign is complete. In terms of difficult to follow along once you're in it, is that what you mean? Because I haven't
It
actually
might be
had that
because
much
of that with
difficulty.
like the band and the sad RG
Oh yeah, it
thing.
does have a lot of prerequisites. Um, I got the first. There might be Riot's quest or two, and then never got anything else. It's
It
supposed to
does
be fairly
kind of
hidden. That
lead
is true.
you. Yeah, it's supposed to be fairly hidden, and it does kind of lead you where the next location of
Yeah,
TMBR is.
yeah. There might be
So
Riot's has, or yeah. Oh, dude, yeah. The Emerald Sword stuff does have a lot of prerequisites. You need to complete the
yeah,
main campaign. You need to complete deep archaeology. You need to complete. There might be Riot's. You need to complete rim archaeology. Then you can get the Shiragi stuff. Then you can get the Emerald Sword campaign or the storyline. And that's a 4% offer chance. Yeah, it's admittedly that one is actually kind of convoluted, but that also is kind of intended that way. Sorry.
yeah.
Now I will say I know people have said that the deep missions are kind of convoluted. I do want to rewrite those at some point to make it a lot more cohesive. Because right now it's like three or four different pieces that are disconnected from one another. And then you do each of them until you get the last set of missions. I do want it to be a bit more of a once you've started the deep storyline, you're in the deep storyline and you can keep going until you want to bail out or until you get to the end.
Yeah. For alien stories like that, the whole intention is to have it kind of difficult and hard to find because then
Yeah.
what you find in it is the reward for having it hard to find. We don't want to have every like unique like artifact or ancient lore or something quests like that easily be obtainable or
Mm-hmm.
trackable because the whole intention is that they're not.
I Heart Dreadnought. Cool.
Sweet.
Took me like 4 saves to learn that. LOL says SMK. Um, Lou Hood says overall, I think the game needs far fewer. I declined this and accidentally hardlocked myself out of progress. States. Yeah, that is something that does need work done. Right now, there's really no reason to ever decline a mission, which doesn't really line up with the idea of like in some sense it kind of does. Like, oh, of course, if you decline something, you're not going to be able to continue it. But I feel like there does need to be a lot more second chances for things. There does need to be a lot more like,
Mm.
oh, you declined this mission, well, that means you can get this path instead. Right now, it's very much accept everything, or if you decline it, then you're dead in the water. Yeah, Doom says, how many people have seen the hallucinations? That's also a slightly obscure thing you can get from not declining missions. Yeah. Has anybody ever taken drugs in Endless Sky? Did you know you could do that? I have twice as Hector. I think I've never actually intentionally gotten that mission. Or, well,
I've
I
seen
mean
it once.
unintentionally, or something. Anyway,
I've seen
don't we
it
all?
once.
Like, I know the mission exists. I cannot recall ever doing it.
Oh, he hit you with that ping.
Would a refactor of save file structure be more useful if it came before or after my mission refactors? Um,
I think that was
Not sure what you mean by that.
his mission program maker. He's developing.
I mean, I know he's working on that, but data format to JSON? I don't think we're moving to JSON now.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, like when have we ever said we're moving to
Bruh.
JSON? I know it's been talked about, but like,
There goes his whole work.
Why?
Did
Now, I
anyone in
understand that
ESN
JSON is
already?
easy to work with because there already exists libraries for using it, but don't like our own data structure isn't like too crazy. It's more like YAML than it is like JSON. So like, are there YAML parsers you could use? Or could you not make your own parser? Like the game has its own data parser. Like what about the data format would we benefit from switching to JSON? It already works. Fissure says the ES data structure is one of the biggest upsides because how loose the structure can be. Several people are typing, yeah. YAML is too open-endedly complex, as the weird net. Yeah, yeah. Hector says it's just not worth making all of our content creators relearn everything just to keep making
Yeah.
content. Yeah, there's that too. There's like this. Do we really want to change the data format for the sake of making third-party tools easier? Um, I mean, like, I'm sorry if it makes it more difficult for you to work with, but we're kind of stuck with it at this point. Yeah, Doom says I don't think there's any merit in replacing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the ES data format is pretty well designed, honestly. Yeah. I mean, it's very easy to extend whenever I want to make a new keyword and have it hooked up to things. Like, very easy. I like it. It's not exactly designed, but it's well implemented, says Fisher.
Just the opposite of
Yeah.
interface.
The weird nut says the data format is simple enough. It's easier to rewrite a parser for it than it is to find and import a JSON says YAML library. Yeah. I mean, I've written a Java parser for the data format. I think we have. I mean, the game is in C++, so we technically have a C++ parser. I think MCO had a Java parser before I did. I would not be surprised if somebody's written a Python parser. I guess the question is what about the parsing is difficult for you, Wolfie? Delvin says, I've also got a to-do on my list to investigate compiling the game, or at least its parsing code, into WASM to run cleanly on the client side on the web. I mean, we have endless web. Wolfie says hooking up to the UI is a massive pain in the ass. Earl says, don't you dare change ES parsing now. I finally mastered it. That's why I rewrote the Python parser in C++. All right. I mean, do you have it figured out now? Because if you have the parsing figured out, it might be a pain in the ass to set up. But I feel like once you have something set up, should it not be clean at that point?
That's question space.
I mean, I haven't looked into how your parser or your formatter works, so maybe I'm just ignorant of what you're working on. So it's a work in progress? All right.
Any other, or was that it?
Yeah, that was the last question from the
Alright.
survey. Let me just refresh to make sure there's no new ones.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep, nothing new. But again,
Alright.
once you've had the time to play the update, please respond to the feedback
Please.
box. The 150th
Other-
last question.
Other general questions about the game?
Yeah, we're closing in on 2 hours here, so we should probably wrap up. But yeah, does anyone else have any other lingering final questions they'd like to ask, or are we good to go? What is this endless sky game thingy? I'm
I
not
don't
sure. Same wavelength.
It's a good question.
Yeah. We'll tell you when you're older. Bro, stop being so horny.
We're not answering that one.
That guy asked, will you add sex to the game? I'm pretty sure we've said in
no.
the past, absolutely no. Endless feet pics. That's a
All right, no more questions. You guys lost privileges.
yeah. You lost question privileges.
Let's go into the VC description. Good question.
Okay, yeah, that's a Discord thing being stupid. If you guys
Yeah.
didn't know, and don't abuse this, totally don't abuse this. Voice channels now have statuses to them. Anyone, as far as I can tell, anyone can edit the status. So somebody made it a bunch of emojis,
Madness.
a bunch of
What?
emotes. Lo-fi girl mad, but anyone can change it. Yeah, now it's changing like crazy as everyone changes it. But yeah, there's no like. Not only can we not stop people from changing it, we can't tell who's changing it.
Yeah.
So really, I can't punish any of you if somebody puts something heinous in there. Like unironically, don't. But a bunch of feet emotes.
No, no.
Yeah, so unironically, don't. But that's a tip for other servers you're in if you want to abuse it,
Oh my god, someone put
and I
something
can't
heinous
stop you.
there.
Um, it really, this is one of those things that Discord should just get their shit together. Like
Yeah.
if Discord makes a shitty system, my answer is abuse the shit out of the system so people complain, and Discord fixes it. This is one of those things they should just not have added. 1984. You're joking.
Gee,
That's Fox says CMD. Yeah, I know,
who
right?
wrote that one.
This has been here for a few months. We talked about this last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy says abuse the system, just not here. Got it. Yeah, exactly. I don't care what you do on other servers. Shutting down Endless Sky. Damn.
About time.
Yeah, Type says Discord throws so much shit around they can't get it all together anymore. Yeah. And Doom says, got it. I'll use this system to cause as many as many problems as possible on other servers. Yeah.
Just don't say we told you to do it.
And the sky is cancelled.
Fleet limits. I think I know who wrote that one.
And the sky end of support November 23rd.
Write that down. Write that down. Put it on
Or
your
November
calendar.
23. Yep, November this year. It's done. Losing it from Steam now. Yeah. It was a good run.
For real though, before we close up here, any actual questions you guys have?
Yeah, this is just the have fun section.
Yeah, we're about to let loose the mics and then leave.
Yeah, ES didn't make enough money. Yeah, we didn't. We couldn't hang out until the Steam payout. Ran out of funds. Add an Easter egg of the nuclear manhole cover. What?
What?
You do that. Look it up.
I'm good.
No. There's a lot of Easter eggs in Spaceport news, like the Die Hard one. Yeah, there's. If you want to put Easter eggs anywhere, it's Spaceport news and Hales. We will not complain. Like if you have a crazy Easter egg you want to stick in there, go ahead.
When's the battle pass coming out? When we sign a deal with Unity?
Poor manhole cover.
Huh. Do you see when? That's just plugins.
High speed manhole cover weapon. That's how we upgrade.
Actually, Commander suggesting that as like a hail. So maybe we could just throw that in as like a really rare hail.
By the way, moving to Unity, ES will now cost $99 to cover the Unity runtime fee, says Ferocious.
Yep.
Doom says, add a hidden mission to locate and repair the Voyager spacecraft. I thought of something like that. I thought of doing one for the Opportunity rover on Mars. But, like, where would the Voyager spacecraft be in 1,000 years?
In the Shiragi system.
Yeah.
No. Your mom's house. Got my dogs laughing at that one.
All right. I think we can wrap it up here, though. Bring Oppie home, says Wolfie. That's exactly what I was thinking. Can you put objects on the edge of the solar system that don't show up on radar or map? Not yet. I do actually want to do that because I would like to do that for at least on the mini map. I don't want, or on the orbits mini map, I don't want certain planets in the solar system to show up because after we added all of the outer planets, it makes it very difficult to select on where you want to land from the orbit map on the map. Uh, but I do also want the ability to completely hide stuff from the radar, like the in-system radar. Or at the very least, make it so that it only appears when it's close to you.
For general reasons, or do you have some lore bits here?
I mean, I just want to do stuff with it. I mean, like I said, I want to make it so that the solar system doesn't look so ugly on the orbits map. But then we could definitely do that for like hidden space stations, or like hidden locations on the edge of systems for like pirates or something. Um,
Hmm.
Stuff like that. Or maybe make it so that something appears as unlandable, but if you try to land on it, it'll actually let you. Ways to hide things, basically, is what I'm looking for. Yeah, Katie says so many things you could do by restricting things to close range sensors. Yeah.
Yeah, Darth Vader or Palabit probably yoinked up the Voyager.
All right, well, I'm getting hungry, so I think we will actually end it off here now instead of just saying we're going to do it. But thank you,
Yeah.
everyone, for showing up. Let's see our numbers. We have 15 on Twitch and, what, like 5, 10, 15, 20, about 30 people here, just under 30 people here. I didn't count that exactly. But good numbers, good numbers. More than last time, I'll say that. Last
Most
time we
are
didn't have too
overlapping,
many,
but
but much just
yeah.
be month to month. Different people are available at different times. A reminder that we plan to do these the first Saturday of every month. That means that the next stream will be November 4th. Um, we will most likely by then, I mean, we will absolutely by then have released 0.10.4, which means that if you're only playing unstable releases, all of the stuff that just came in 0.10.3 that we talked about today, you will have access to on Steam
It'd be nice
without
to
having to
see.
opt into the beta branch. And we'll also have some of the UI improvements that I talked about, as well as a bunch of bug fixes.
Yep.
So next update will, or I mean next chat, we'll probably talk about that, as well as a bit more specifics about what we will be doing for 0.10.5, because by the end of this month, there are a few things that I want to talk to with a few people about getting finished, including I know that Sog mentioned at the beginning of the stream that the pirate intros, or the
Hmm.
pirate intro, is
Yep.
potentially being looked at for the next major update. There's some stuff that I think might delay that, but not for bad reasons. I want to start expanding some of the pirate gameplay in some aspects, like these close range sensors that we just mentioned. I want to have stuff like
Nice.
that, most likely in the next major update, along with some more fancy things we can do to hide locations from the player, but not hide them if you're a pirate.
And I'd like to see the Quark stuff in 10.5, but that kind of just relies on we have some people doing the models, or we have Todd doing the models, so it's no
Map
rush with him.
reworks as
But
Azure, part of it. Something like that.
wink, wink,
Treasure
nod.
maps is time? Absolutely. I would absolutely love to have treasure maps as a thing in the game. Um,
Hey, I don't even know what he's talking about. So
Laura asks, is the pirate line in the or in addition to the main campaign or instead? Instead, it would be an optional fourth route that you could take,
yeah,
aside from doing Free World, Republic, or Syndicate, assuming it gets done.
I
Um,
wouldn't. think would it be kind of like a fourth altogether, or kind of like this alternative, but not one of the big three? I'm not sure how it's planned out, so it could be
We'll see.
either, I
We'll see.
suppose.
But
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you once again, everyone, for showing up, and
Thank you.
we'll see you
Please
all on the 4th, same time.
please answer the surveys. Thank you.
Yep. Adios.
See you.